Thank you so much, Jesse, and good morning to everyone on the call. I am excited about being back here again. I hope Jesse was able to relay my apologies. Last week, I was not able to come on because of certain situations, but I'm glad I'm here. I'd also like to mention tonight I am very close to the airport. So if you do hear some sounds in the background, it's because the aeroplanes are taking off and landing. So please don't be worried about the sound in the background. Great, so we will continue with the series on engaging the 7 habits of highly effective people. And today we want to look at habit 1. If you remember the last time I was here, we were talking about paradigms, and we want to continue this session with looking at habit 1. You always see this at the beginning of these sessions because I'd like everyone to know that this is not my own creation. I am taking all the material that we are looking at from this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a book that profoundly transformed my own life and set me on a course to look into how I could be effective as a leader, effective as a mother, effective as a communications expert, effective as a leadership coach. And so a lot of in fact, all the nuggets will be got from this book. And I will add a few things from other books I have read or other experiences I have gone through to elaborate on these particular principles. Again, the themes in the book are paradigms and principles. There's private victory, which is habits 1, 2, and 3. Then it goes into public victory, which is habits, that should be 4, 5, and 6. Sorry, not 3, 4, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. And then the renewal habit, which is habit 7. And today we are looking at private victory, which is habit 1. Habit 1 falls under the private victory. And habit 1 is be proactive. That is the first habit that Stephen Convey encourages leaders who want to be effective. Now, just remember that we're not saying that the leaders are not good or the leaders are not doing well, but we're saying that you can be a leader, but you're not effective in the way that you carry on your leadership. And there is a more effective way of doing it. And that's why the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I have found, is a great book to have, or great principles to have, because it helps you to be more effective. You might be doing great, but you can be more effective if you inculcate these particular habits. And so the objective of this particular time that we're having together will be to understand the first habit of highly effective people and to understand how to apply the first habit. Now, I do encourage those who have not read the book to get the book, because what we do here is really just an overview. It will just be nuggets, and to also be things that I feel have really profoundly helped me to become more effective. But when you go through the book, you'll definitely be able to find even more that can help you understand the different habits we'll be going through, the different principles that we'll be talking about. So what is habit 1? This habit counteracts this following paradigm. The paradigm that says, this is just the way things are, and there's not much that I can do about it. It's a defeatist paradigm that this habit is trying to counteract. In other words, there's nothing I can do about my situation. I've found myself here. There's nothing I can do about my environment. There's nothing I can do about my family or my children or my business. It's just the way things are. That is a paradigm that this particular habit seeks to counteract, because the paradigm from habit 1 says, I am free to choose and I'm ultimately responsible for my happiness. And I don't know if I shared this here. The first time I interacted with this book was in a meeting that I had been invited to by a friend who had just begun some leadership courses. And this particular friend invited me to this session that she had begun, and she had invited a number of lawyers and engineers, really top-level managers in society. And as I sat there, she made a statement that really shook me. And she said, each one of you are where you are because of the choices you have made. Now, being that she was a friend of mine, for some reason, I thought she was talking directly to me. I don't know how many of you have been in those situations, maybe in a service or in a place where somebody says something and you feel that they're looking at you and you feel that they're talking to you. And that's where I found myself. And I felt so offended because this friend knew what I was going through. At that time, I was really struggling. And I thought, how dare she say this when she knows what I've been going through? So I left that meeting very discouraged, despondent, and feeling really down. But I decided to buy the book. And then as I thought over it, as I read through the chapters, I actually realized that maybe what she said is actually right. And we'll go through this particular session that we're going through, and we'll begin to understand that we are where we are because of the choices we have made. Wherever we may find ourselves, good or bad, a choice has been made to get us there. And that's what this paradigm says. I am free to choose, and I'm utterly responsible for my happiness. Some other people say, you carry your own weather. You carry your own weather. This diagram really brings this point out very clearly. Steve Covey says that between stimulus and response is a space. And that space here is the freedom to choose or choice. And he says that freedom to choose has been made possible by the gifts that the Creator has given you. The Creator has given you 4 gifts that enable you to choose what response you will portray when you're stimulated by a certain situation. The first gift that you've been given is the gift of self-awareness, the ability to look within yourself and judge your weaknesses and your strengths. Every single one of us is able to say, this is my strength. This is my weakness. These are areas that I feel challenged about. And these are areas I'm able to unleash and get my potential out there. The other gift that you've been given is a gift of imagination, to imagine what could be, to imagine who you could be, to imagine the future. That is a gift that has been given to you and locks into your freedom to choose. The other gift that you've been given is the gift of conscience. The conscience is knowing what is right and what is wrong, what is good for you and what is bad for you. That is a gift. I do know as children, it might not be very clear, but as we grow older, we begin to understand this is right, this is wrong, this is good for me, this is bad, even if we don't agree with it, but we do know it. And the fourth gift you've been given is the gift of independent will. You can decide what you want to do. And I'll say it here, I've had a lot of people say, that's the way I am, deal with it, okay? That's the way I am, there's nothing I can do about it. I picked this up from my grandmother. I am just like my father. Or like some people have said, the fruit hasn't fallen too far from the tree. But what Steve Covey says, and through my experience, and even as a Christian myself, I know that each one of us has an independent will. We can decide, I will not say this, I will not do that, I will not go here, I'll not go there. And we can be able to carry out that which we choose to do. So those are the 4 gifts you've been given that enable you to choose what kind of response you will portray, you will unleash, you will display in whatever environment you're in when you're stimulated by a particular situation. And this is so true because you find that a lot of us are stimulated by the very same stimuli. But at the end of the day, you have 2 different responses. I know I've got a story I was told by, well, I heard this story where there were 2 men. One was a drunkard and the other was a great statesman. And the drunkard was asked, you know, why is it that you're in this kind of state, in this really sorry state? And he said, it's because my father was a drunkard. Therefore, there's nothing I could do about it. That was the example I got. And the statesman, his brother, was asked, how come you have been able to be so different from your brother? And he said, it's because of my father. I chose that because I saw the way my father behaved and the results of his behavior, that I'll never touch the bottle. And so he became a statesman. So what am I saying here? Every single one of us has the freedom to choose the response we have to life situations. Now let's look at the principles. Remember I said at the beginning last week, I said all that we are talking about is that we want our lives to be built on principles, because principles don't change. Principles are like laws, like the law of gravity. The law of gravity stands whether you're in America, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Busoga, whether you're in Gulu, the principle of gravity still operates. And so even with the 7 habits of highly effective people and the habits that we are looking at, each habit has principles that help us to be effective. And let's look at some of these principles. The principle of responsibility, the principle of choice, as I've mentioned, the principle of accountability, the principle of initiative, and the principle of resourcefulness. And let's see what these principles actually mean. It means that as human beings, we are responsible for our own lives, okay? So your highest responsibility is your own life. Not the lives of others, not even the lives of your children. Your utmost responsibility is to be responsible for your life and how it is led. The second principle, and the meaning of the principle, is our behavior, as I've mentioned, is a function of our own choices. People may make choices for you, but you have a choice whether you allow those choices to affect your situation, okay? The other principle, or the meaning of the principle, is our behavior is based on principles rather than feelings. If you're being effective or you're walking by the habit 1, your behavior is based on principles rather than feelings. Therefore, even when you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like getting out of bed, you know, the principle that governs your life as a human being is a principle of work. You must work if you want to eat. So you get out of that bed, even if you don't feel like it, because your life or your behavior is based on a principle. Your behavior is based on the principle that what you give is what you get, whether you feel it or not. So even if you don't feel like telling the truth, you tell the truth because you know that that is what you're supposed to do. And when you tell the truth, you get truth coming back to you. So your behavior should be based on principle rather than feelings. And then even when the feelings do come up and you feel you want to say a word that is out of context, or you want to say a word out of anger, you know that you can subordinate those feelings to the principle that I've mentioned, that you have a choice in how you respond to a stimuli, okay? So we can subordinate our feelings to a principle that we know will help us to be effective. Number 5 is we have the initiative and the responsibility to make things happen. In other words, I, as a person, should know that I have the ability to initiate what happens in my own life. I have the ability to initiate what happens in my own life. I want to give an example, as since I know you're business people on the call, and I want to use an example in Neolife, if I can remember how it works. Like I just mentioned, I'm now a great user of the products. I don't do the business as much as I used to. But what I do remember, there were situations when it came to month end. And month end comes and you have your downline, and they're supposed to have been putting in all these PVs so that you can be able to move up to another status. And you find that by the time the warehouse or whatever it's called now is closed, you have not put through those point values. And if I remember, well, there used to be some sort of leeway given, some extra days, and still within those extra days, you're not able to make those points that you had anticipated that you will be able to gain for that month. What will be your response? How do you take responsibility for that situation? What are you able to initiate for the next month based on what you have experienced? Or will you carry that same experience to the next month and say, there's nothing I can do about it. This is the way my team moves. I think I am doomed to stay in this particular status. Each one of us, if we are highly effective leaders, can initiate and take responsibility to make things happen. You can work at making sure that certain things happen in your life. I was talking to a friend recently, actually where I'm staying at the moment, my host, and we were talking about people who always have a plan B. They say, you know, this is my plan A and this is my plan B. And we were saying that no effective leader should have a plan B, because if you have a plan B, the default human action is to always go to the plan B because you're thinking plan A would not work. We have the responsibility and we can initiate situations around us to make sure that plan A does work. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the proactive practices. What are the practices that will help you to engage the principles of habit 1? And I think this particular one, we've been carrying it on from the very beginning of this session. Pause and respond based on principles and the desired result. In other words, effective leaders are not the kind of people who respond impulsively. A situation has happened, you take a pause. It's a thing which I used to tell my children, that take a time out. Don't hurriedly make a response or hurriedly say something because you feel you have to at that particular time. I used to say the world will not end if you pause for 30 minutes or 1 minute or even a whole hour. That email has come through, those of you who work with organizations, that email has come through from your boss. And it's the kind of email that causes certain feelings to rise up within you. Is your response to right away begin to respond to that email? Or are you able to think through, read between the lines, what exactly is happening here? Or will my response add value to the situation at hand? So the first proactive practice is pause and respond based on principles and the desired results that you'd like to see at the end of this situation. The next practice is use proactive language. So let's go back to the issue of the downline. So your downline, quote unquote, have disappointed you because they did not put in the work that you thought they should put through. What will be the kind of language you will use after that situation when you next meet them? Will it be to blame them for where you are? Or will it be to use a language that proactively helps you to begin to initiate with your team how to do better in the coming month? So what are we saying here? Effective leaders use proactive language. Effective leaders are able to make sure that what comes out of their mouth adds value to the people around them. And it's a principle that I have really inculcated in myself over the years, that I'm very careful to ask myself, what will what I say have, what impact will what I say have on the people around me? Because once that word is out, it's out. What is another practice? To focus on your circle of influence. Steve Convey says we have a circle of concern and a circle of influence that operates in our lives. And I'll just go into detail about this. Now, your circle of concern looks something like this. There are different things that you can be concerned about: your environment, your friends, your girls' fellowship, maybe your weight loss, your sister-in-law. So many things seem to concern you. But Steve Convey says that you should be able to look at all these things and decide which one will I make part of my circle of influence? Because I can't influence all these things, but as an effective leader, which ones do I want to focus on and say, these ones I can influence? He says, focus there as an effective leader. Some of us want to take in so much We want to influence so much, even out of that circle of concern, we're still taking so much, but maybe you need to come down and take a few. Maybe from all these things, the girls' fellowship, the brother, your politics, cousin, and so on, you need to just zero down on just to the neighbor, your weight loss program, that cousin who you are giving some help to, and that sister-in-law you need to build a relationship with. Maybe that is what you need to focus on and what you can influence at that particular time. Then you can be effective. Or maybe you even need to slim down even more. Maybe for this particular season, you need to just focus on your sister, who again, you're trying to help out maybe with her school fees or trying to help out with her situation and developing a relationship with your husband. And the rest, just forget about for now and focus on this area so that you can be an effective leader and you're not stretched thin trying to, like somebody said, conquer the whole world. That is another principle, practice that you need to get involved in. The other practice is to become a transitional person. A transitional person is one who breaks the flow of bad behaviors, negative traditions, or harmful practices that get passed from generation to generation or from situation to situation, whether in a family, a workplace, community, or wherever you may be. You may know that this particular practice doesn't help us as a team. The practice may be, again, talking about our businesses in Neolife, that every time we get to a point where we have not been able to succeed as a team to reach our goals, we begin to batter each other and pass on the blame game. Will you be that transitional person who says, this must stop with me? I will not pass this particular practice on to the next month, as it says here, situation to situation. Or in a family, where it is said for us as a family, we don't entertain visitors, okay? And that is just who we are. Or as a family, we don't give. You need to be the kind of person, as an effective leader, carrying out the first habit of being proactive to say, the buck stops with me. This particular habit will stop with me because I am a transitional person. Do you have the courage to be that person? Steve Covey is saying, as an effective leader, you must have the courage to say, it must stop, this must not continue. And so when we look at these practices, we'll go over them again. Pause and respond based on principles and the desired results that you want to see at the end. Take time, think through, and then respond in a way that gives you the desired results. Use proactive language, okay? It's the basic form of communication that we have in a relationship. So make sure that you focus and are intentional about what comes out of your mouth. And by the way, not only out of your mouth, communication is not what only comes out of our mouth, but even body language. How do you present yourself? Recently, I was telling some, our biggest problem is that these days when we communicate, we don't communicate empathetically. I'm on my phone and I'm saying, I'm listening to you. That language is saying, actually, you're not as important to me as what is going on my phone. That is not proactive language. A highly effective person always uses a proactive language that will build the relationships around them. Focus on your circle of influence. Instead of spreading yourself thin to try and get involved in all the things that are in your circle of concern, find out of your circle of concern, what is your circle of influence, where you can be effective and add value. And it will keep changing with different seasons of your life. But right now, what is it that you can influence and add value to at this moment? And number 4, become a transitional person. Become that person who says, these particular habits, these particular behaviors, this particular way of life stops with me. I will be the person that helps people know that there's another way. There is another way to behave. And so I want to thank you for listening. And those are the nuggets that I have got from habit 1. And I'd like to now hand back to Jesse.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harriet. This has been spot on. Thank you so much for those powerful nuggets on habit one, the habit of being proactive. As you shared, 3 things stood out for me, and I'll just share them quickly. Number 1, don't accept things as they are. Take the responsibility to change them. And I think you've given very relatable examples for the kind of business that we do, because in a business or in leadership generally, you'll find that your productivity is the outcome of what the people in your team have done. Okay, so when you don't perform, there is a temptation to point the finger to the team and say, my team, because my team is not performing, I am not where I am. But what I'm taking away from this is, don't blame anyone, take the responsibility. So don't accept things as they are. You have the responsibility, I have the responsibility to change them. And that leads me to the second point, where you talked about the circle of influence. And what that means for me is focusing on things that I can do. My team is not performing, what can I do? I can go and sponsor new people. I can go and bring new clients on board. I can use methods and find new territories, new markets, you know? So focusing on what you can do. There are things that are beyond your control. You know, there are things that are beyond your control. You cannot control government policy. You cannot control the economy, but you can control the people you talk to. Go and talk to new people, you know? So always find out, what is it I can do given my situation? Then the final thing that you've talked about that I'd never really quite thought about was becoming a transition person. You know, becoming a transition person, even in our personal lives. There are things that we have taken on from our fathers and forefathers. You know, for us in our family, this has been the trend. But now being proactive makes me realize that I have the power to say, this is where the buck stops. This is where it ends. And from this point forward, we are going to be different. So become a transition person, maybe in your family, maybe in your team, maybe taking that step is the transition for your team to believe that it is actually possible. So become a transition person. And the other thing that you mentioned was pause and respond. You know, don't be quick to, when someone says no, pause and respond. Maybe they are not saying no to you. Maybe they are saying no to your offering. Pause and respond. Maybe you encounter a challenge. Ask yourself, what can this teach me? Or how can I become better as a result of this, rather than becoming bitter as a result of this? So take time to pause and respond. Thank you, Harriet, once again for these helpful nuggets. I am sure that we are going to become better as a result of these wonderful and insightful nuggets. So go back and each of us really, this is an opportunity for us to go back and reflect. Ask yourself, what circumstances have I accepted in my life? You know, what have you chosen to accept and say, for me, I cannot do anything about this because this is how I am. What circumstances have I accepted? And then 2, ask yourself, how will I begin to be proactive and take responsibility to bring change in my life? How will I be proactive, take responsibility, and bring change in my life? That has been our session for this morning. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Harriet, and thank you all for your wonderful comments in the chat. We'll close it here.